Today is day 2, and our goal for the day is to get all 4 walls framed and up into place. Yesterday we finished about 95% of the framing of these first 2 walls, and all we have to do to finish is add some flat blocking at 10 feet from the bottom plate and then add our plywood. Once we have the walls completely framed and the plywood on, we're going to use the grade awl to lift the walls up into place. So as you can see here, we're cutting blocks that we're going to stick in between the studs, making sure that they're flat blocked and flush with the front of the studs, so that when we attach the plywood, it can be supported all the way around the edge. So before we nail on our plywood, we need to make sure that the walls are square and not shifted to one side or the other. So what we did is we ended up measuring from corner to corner and making sure that those measurements were even so that we knew that the wall was square. Once we knew that everything looked good, we were able to nail off the 4x10 pieces of plywood, 1 nail every 6 inches along the edge, and then 1 every 12 inches in the field. After nailing everything off, we attached 4 straps to the double top plate of the wall and attached that to the grade awl so that we can lift it up into place. Now the challenge here is lifting this couple 1,000-pound wall into place and making sure that the anchor bolts in the concrete go into the holes that we drilled in the bottom plate of the wall. Once we get the wall up in place, we're going to end up adding some bracing, as you can see here, to temporarily hold the wall into place while we build the other 3 walls. Next, we got to fasten the framing down to the anchor bolts in the concrete to make sure that the wall doesn't go anywhere. So basically we're going to repeat the same process. We're going to make sure that the wall is square, and then we're going to add our plywood, nail every 6 inches around the edge, 12 inches in the field. Then we'll add a little bit of extra bracing to the double top plate of the wall to help support it as we lift it. Because it's such a long and heavy wall, we end up using 4 straps to lift it and set it in place. Here's the challenge that I was talking about earlier. You see all those anchor bolts there in the concrete? Yeah, those are supposed to go in the bottom plate of the wall. And when you're dealing with a 32-foot long by 14-foot tall wall that weighs almost 2,000 pounds, it can definitely be a little bit of a challenge. That being said, we're always up for a challenge. And I'm sure by now you know what comes next. You gotta brace it and fasten it down to the anchor bolts so that the wall doesn't go anywhere. And that's 2 walls down, and now we just got 2 to go. By this point it's getting pretty late in the day, and we know we're not going to have enough time to finish all 4 walls, but we're determined to get at least 3 of them done. So we lay out all the studs, the top plates and the bottom plates, and get to work. We start marking out and drilling the holes for the anchor bolts in the bottom plate. While a couple of us are working on the bottom plates, the others are working on the top plates, getting them measured, cut, and ready to go. Next, we line up the studs with the top plate and bottom plate and nail them in place. After those are nailed in place, we start working on our flat blocks for our plywood. And finally, we start laying out our 4x10 sheets of plywood to start fastening them to the wall. And as usual, we gotta add a brace to the top plate so we can add straps and lift the wall. So to be able to set the wall in place, we actually have to disconnect the diagonal bracing behind it from the concrete so that there's room to set the wall in place. Now for the 3rd time, the challenging part again. The only difference this time is we don't have as much wiggle room because we're trying to set this wall in place between our other 2 framed walls. It ended up being so difficult, we actually had to call in the expert, my mother. No, I'm just kidding. She actually just got off work and decided, you know what sounds like fun? Let's go work on the shop. And by the end of the day, we had 2 walls completely set in place and the 3rd mostly set in place and ready to go. And we didn't quite get where we wanted to go, but it was still a great day of work and super duper excited to see this huge visual of the walls getting set up in place. These are the anchor bolts that I was talking about earlier that we had to set the walls on. As you can see, we had a square washer and a nut to use to fasten the framing down to the concrete. And yes, that is supposed to be a window, and no, we're not going to leave the plywood there. We're actually going to end up cutting that out in a later date and time. just going to be easier to do that way. Just to give you a visual, we ended up using the anchor bolts in the center of the concrete, put a 2x6 there, that way we could attach our diagonal braces for the walls, and that's how we're able to hold them in place. All in all, another great day of work, and we can't wait to see this building when it's finished. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.